Welcome to this explainer. So I want you to just picture this scenario for a second. Your organization's cybersecurity audit is fast approaching. The leadership team is totally stressed out, policies are being frantically updated, dusty binders of documentation are being gathered from who knows where, and the countdown timer is ticking loudly in everyone's head. You and your team have spent, literally, weeks trying to map out controls just to make sure you pass. It's a high-stakes moment, and honestly, it creates immense anxiety in boardrooms everywhere. But here is the massive elephant in the boardroom that we really need to talk about. If we pass the audit, are we actually secure? We need to immediately challenge this huge misconception. You see, passing an audit simply means you validated your controls against a specific, defined checklist at one exact point in time. But attackers? Yeah, they do not care about your documentation. They are out there exploiting weaknesses every single day. So here is the roadmap for our explainer today. 1. We'll look at the compliance illusion. 2. Visibility and access weaknesses. 3. The vulnerability window. 4. Beyond point-in-time reviews. And 5. Building continuous cyber resilience. All right, let's dive right into part 1, the compliance illusion. A compliance focus is heavily centered on things like documentation, control mapping, and evidence collection. Basically, it proves that a security control exists on paper. But think about it like a car's airbag. An audit checks to see if the airbag is installed, right? But a resilience focus asks the much more important question: will it actually deploy in a crash? Resilience prioritizes effectiveness under actual real-world attack conditions. An audit should confirm your security maturity, not create it from scratch. Organizations that focus solely on just passing the audit, they often miss this bigger picture completely.
Moving right along to Section 2, Visibility and Access Weaknesses.
You've probably heard the old saying, you cannot secure what you cannot see. And honestly, it hits the nail on the head. Many organizations struggle to maintain complete visibility across the rapidly evolving digital environments. We're talking about things like unmanaged cloud assets, shadow IT popping up in different departments, and forgotten legacy infrastructure. Look, if an asset is undiscovered, it's unmanaged. And unmanaged assets rapidly become really dangerous attack surfaces and blind spots that ultimately lead to audit failures. Now, directly tied to what we can't see is who has access to what we can see. Because as organizations grow, user permissions tend to just accumulate over time like a snowball. An employee changes roles, or maybe a contractor needs temporary access for a project, and those rights are just never revoked. This naturally leads to dormant accounts, excessive permissions, and privileged access misuse. Without proper access governance and really thorough reviews, these stacked-up permissions create severe insider threats and inevitably lead to the kind of regulatory violations that audits usually uncover way too late. Which brings us to Section 3, the vulnerability window. Relying solely on audits introduces a severe temporal flaw. It's a huge gap in time. Imagine this. In month 1, you have your formal audit validation. Everything looks perfectly compliant and secure. High fives all around. But from month 2 all the way through to month 11, unpatched vulnerabilities are just allowed to fester in the background until the next annual audit finally rolls around in month 12. Attackers do not operate on an annual schedule. They are probing your systems every single day, while those audits are really just a snapshot in time. And this brings us to a really harsh practical reality. A vulnerability that is identified but not actually remediated remains a vulnerability. It is a super common trap to think that simply running vulnerability scans means you are suddenly secure. But threat actors do not care if a weakness appears on some internal IT report. They literally only care whether that vulnerability remains unpatched and exploitable. True risk reduction requires actual remediation, not just discovery. Okay, let's look at Section 4, Beyond Point-in-Time Reviews. It's not just our own internal patching we have to sweat over, it's also our operational relationships. Modern organizations run heavily on external vendors, cloud providers, and consultants who process highly sensitive information. Relying on these external partners introduces severe data exposure risks if they're only ever evaluated during the initial onboarding phase. Insufficient vendor assessments and weak supply chain governance can so easily bypass a traditional point-in-time audit. This entire situation demands a completely new way of looking at our defenses. We need to focus on control effectiveness, which is a security control's ability to successfully function and protect systems under realistic day-to-day conditions. We absolutely have to contrast this against mere control existence. Having an incident response plan or a disaster recovery backup system is totally useless if it's just documented in a binder on a shelf but never actively validated. Let's be real, a documented control is simply not the same as a tested control.
Finally, Section 5, Building Continuous Cyber Resilience.
To actually fix these gaps, executive leadership needs a new scorecard. You need to be tracking these specific metrics year-round. For assets, you want to track the percentage of known assets. For vulnerabilities, track your average remediation time. For access, monitor the exact number of privileged accounts that are being actively reviewed. And of course, track your average containment time for incidents. When you focus on these metrics, it literally shifts an organization's culture away from that last-minute audit panic and toward true continuous security maturity. And those metrics feed directly into operational steps. Here are the 4 steps successful organizations use to make audits a simple validation process rather than a massive headache. Step 1 is continuous risk monitoring. Step 2 is continuous control validation, actually testing those defenses regularly. Step 3 is proactive vulnerability remediation, and Step 4 is executive governance oversight. When you build these 4 steps into your day-to-day operations, passing an audit just becomes a natural byproduct of your overall resilience. So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on. Are we truly audit-ready for our highest risks? Take a really hard look at your internal posture today. Because if your organization's primary objective is just to pass the audit, you might be missing the very real risks that could cause a massive breach next month. It is definitely